All right, welcome in, everybody. Important Nonsense Podcast. Steve Bonham, Neil Smith, Mike Manning, 32 teams in 32 days. It's the San Francisco treat, 49ers. Neil, you ready?
Oh, I'm
Going
always
out to the
ready.
Bay.
I'm always ready to go out to the Bay, hop a trolley, get some rice-a-roni, try not to get Shanahaned by the running back room. You know how I do.
Well, you know how we do, and it is a analyst by committee here at Important Nonsense. So we've got Mike as well. Mike, you excited for this? Shanahan, this whole room here.
Let's get some Shanahanigans.
Everybody needs some good shenanigans every once in a while.
Spice up our lives.
Exactly. It is August 12th, batch recording these episodes, so if anything seems out of date, out of place, that would be why. We will catch up with everything on our wrap-up show live on August 26th. Come in with your comments, help us fill that show, and we'll go back over everything once again. But if you want to get answers sooner than that, patreon.com/importantnonsense. Join us, talk to us in the Discord, ask us all your questions. The $5 tier, you get access to literally everything. Projections, rankings, betting stuff, the stat book, and then you get these episodes 2 days early as well. So fantastic stuff over there. Everything we do here is 12-team PPR, so keep that in mind as well. If any of the ranks or projections or anything seems off, that's why. Adjust the math in your own head. But we start at the top. It is Trey Lance. Noticeably missing Jimmy Garoppolo. Because he is on his way out. We just don't know where. Could be Cleveland. Could be Seattle for some reason. Could be the XFL. The Rock is probably looking for some QBs. I don't know. But he will not be with this team. That's what we know. So Trey Lance show. The hype train is chugging along pretty aggressively. Mike, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts on Trey Lance with his first year starting?
I mean, there are people that are comparing it to whenever Lamar Jackson was like going into his second year and stuff, and that's insane. But
what? No,
it's still
that's not unrealistic.
That's perfectly rational.
As we said in the Philadelphia episode, there have only been two quarterbacks since 2014 that have been quarterback one in points per game and not had over 500 rushing yards. They were Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers, two very good passers. So Trey Lance is the new Konami code type guy. He's obviously was drafted because everybody was thinking, what can Shanahan do with this phenomenal athlete that can run the ball and has an arm that can chuck it 80 yards in the air? We're going to find out, I guess, because he's finally going to start outside the shadow of Jimmy Garoppolo, who was starting a lot and looking meh.
Yeah, not great.
Looking like he should be in the USFL.
You had it on here. He started 3 games last season and averaged 18.7 points per game with just over 10 rushes a game during that stretch. If you put that out for an entire season, that would put him right at QB 13, which is basically where I have him projected for this year. Plenty of upside, but to me, I think I'm still not ready to completely reach for him, depending on where you can get him to fall in your draft. Neil, how about you?
I've got him. We've talked about our quarterback tiers for what feels like forever, breaking this down, and I've got him in the vaunted tier 5. Little upside tier. It's the tier of all the hopes and dreams, and all your upside is right there for you. And I've actually got him as the top of tier 5. So if I'm looking at upside guys, he's my preference. It's Lance, it's Fields, it's Tua Tagovailoa, and it's Trevor Lawrence. So give me Fields.
100% exactly my rankings as well. So
Mike mentioned it. Yeah, exactly. It's like we've been doing this for 7 years or whatever it is now. Mike mentioned it. Trey Lance can throw a football over them mountains. Like that is just it's what he can do, but it's also that juicy rushing floor. It's just a question of is he going to be accurate enough, and can he put all the pieces together to really do it? The nice thing about this is I don't even really care if he wins games, similarly to Jalen Hurts for redraft. Not this year, Jalen Hurts. Previous iterations of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, last year, Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, last year. I don't even care. Like, don't even bother. I don't care if you win the game. I just need you to be out there running around and throwing the ball around the yard. And I think given what we've seen so far, he is kind of like the new Jalen Hurts for 2022, that type of thing. You can get him super late. He's still at a value for you, but the tremendous amount of upside that you could pull in off this is, if my quarterbacks are if I end up missing and I end up with like Kirk Cousins or Derek Carr from the khaki pants tier, if I got to go Dockers, then I absolutely want to get Trey Lance to get those Joe Namath slingshot briefs to go on under my khaki pants, and we're just hoping that we don't need
this is
to rely on.
A metaphor wrapped in a metaphor. I love it.
Exactly. It's a lot to unpack there, but anybody over 50 really loved that. By the way, right. So here's what I'll say. You're hoping that you just don't even need your floor guy after a little while, and it's just Trey Lance the rest of the way for you. Feel really good about it. He's got enough weapons to where I think it's not unrealistic that he could finish right around QB 12, maybe even a little higher if the certain things bounced his way. He's got all the tools. He's got the pieces. You get the rushing floor. Mike, you've got him even higher than us.
Because I do have the belief that he is going to put at least most of these things together. And I think it's not crazy at all to think he's going to have a season similar to Jalen Hurts did last year, or for us to ask that of him as in terms of our fantasy team. Because I think he's more willing to run the ball than Hurts was. I think that he has a better arm, at least when it comes to arm strength, certainly. Accuracy is going to be hit or miss, That's just what you get. But you also didn't have the most accurate quarterback in Hurts last year either.
Right.
And if you're telling me that he's going to have an even more talented surrounding cast, which he obviously does, if you put Deebo Samuel, Brandon Aiyuk, and George Kittle compared to rookie Devontae Smith, Jalen Reagor, and eventually Dallas Goedert by himself.
Well, yeah, then it was Ertz and Goddard. I wouldn't even have listed some of the receivers you did. I've just been listing the tight ends.
So you had 2 tight ends and then a rookie wide receiver compared to George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and Brandon Aiyuk, plus Elijah Mitchell in the backfield. I think that it's completely sane to sit there and say, I expect a QB1 season out of, like a top 12 QB season out of Trey Lance this year.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, the comparison to Hurts for sure. Last year coming out of the draft, we talked about the fact that arm talent isn't a question. Ability to run the ball isn't a question. Even accuracy with him in college wasn't a question. It was the fact that he played at North Dakota State. So the competition level for what he was putting those numbers up against isn't as high as some of the other guys he was being compared to. And then how quickly could he pick up an NFL offense and transition to the NFL game? They gave him a full year. They built an entire offense around him this offseason. They gave him essentially the full year last year to learn the playbook. He played 3 games like we talked about, but it's not like he was trusted to be the QB1 or the starter. We didn't have a situation where, like it was with Kaepernick and Jason Campbell, where Campbell goes down, Kaepernick comes in and takes over, and all of a sudden it's just his team from that point on. That didn't happen last year with Lance. Nobody really expected it to. But I said coming out of the draft that to me, Kaepernick was the most apples to apples comparison. Just a guy, smaller school, who put up good numbers in college, kind of got overlooked in the process, and then brings that mobility, brings the arm strength, and can do so much when you get him in space and give him an opportunity to do stuff. So plenty of upside there. Right now, he's going in the exact same range of ADP as Kirk Cousins and Derek Carr. If that's the case, I'd rather shoot for the upside. Even though I have those 2 ranked slightly ahead of him, I'd rather take the upside with Lance because of how the board is falling. You've got guys like we've talked about with Tannehill, Jameis Winston, who you can get later to be your safety net, to pair with Lance and feel okay about it, and still have the upside that you're looking for to try to win your league. And you do it for a 9th round pick. So it's not like you have to overpay for it right now either.
Historically, that's what we're looking for when we give quarterback advice year on year on year. We're always looking for who's going to pop in that 9th, 10th round that could be a league winner for you. Yeah, I think this is our guy.
All right, running back. Elijah Mitchell broke out onto the scene as the 6th-round rookie, which is pretty standard for a Shanahan offense. No, what's standard for the Shanahan offense is drafting Trey Sermon and then giving all the work to the 6th-round rookie. That's what's standard for the Shanahan.
I didn't want to make a giant paragraph.
Fair enough.
What's also standard is then in the next draft drafting another running back in Tyrion Davis Price. Yeah, that's also standard.
This season been all by the book.
Yeah. He wasn't exactly the epitome of health, though. And this is an offense with a different leading rusher in 5 straight seasons. So it's never the same guy year over year. He was 4th in 10-plus yard rushes, 4th in yards after contact per attempt. And then you mentioned, does putting Trey Lance into the mix take away from his usage in the red zone, which was a big part of his game last season? And he only saw a target in 6 of 11 games, so only saw more than 3 in 2 games. So despite the fact that he can catch the ball, has that physical ability, hasn't been utilized that way. Again, it could have been a Garoppolo thing, but does Trey Lance change that for you at all? For me, I've got him at 26, Neil 22, Mike 24. The ECR has him at 24 as well. And currently, Elijah Mitchell going at 23 in ADP.
So, pretty cut and dry stuff.
Yeah, pretty uniform across the board. 5th-round pick in ADP at the moment. And again, this is another tier thing for me. So I've got Elijah Mitchell at 26th, and that's not really saying that I don't buy into the talent. It's just I've got him in that same neighborhood of guys that are being kind of undervalued as the lead back on their roster, or to me have upside. So if you want to take him as high as 24, low as 27, that's kind of the way I have it broken down in that tier. I'm good with any of that.
It's fine. He's a back-end RB2. He's the only one I want for redraft for 2022. I'm not interested in drafting anything else. There's no way you could know who to handcuff him to. This is historically a giant mess of a horrible car wash. I think largely that's going to remain unchanged. It's going to be a car wash. You still have your Jeff Wilsons and your JaMychal Hasty's on the roster. Those guys are going to make the team. They're not going to get cut. They're there for a reason. They're there because that's the Shanahan philosophy in the system. They always use the multi-back approach, and it's always a committee and a car wash. And if something happened to Elijah Mitchell, it's not going to be one guy. At least with Elijah Mitchell, you can hang your head on the idea that as long as he's healthy, he's almost certainly going to be the true lead back, which is why I'm willing to go up to about back-end RB2, high-end RB3 type territory with him. But beyond that, it gets real nasty real quick. And so that's the one thing to be aware of if you're looking at Elijah Mitchell is there's no safety net here for you. You're just dealing with this.
To your point, everything else is going undrafted. Tyrion Davis Price is going at running back 63, and then Jeff Wilson at 72, and Trey Sermon at 73. People still believe. But even then, like I said, it's way off the page completely.
Do they? At 73? I wouldn't call that believing.
I mean, they've got him above like Juszczyk, who actually has a role, JaMychal Hasty, who actually is still on the roster as well. But
fair enough.
wide receiver. This is part of the reason why there is not much to talk about in the running back room, because the rest of the running back room is really the WB, the wide back on this depth chart, Deebo Samuel. So I've got Deebo projected out for 85 targets, which is leading the team, leading wide receivers, and 76 rush attempts, which would be roughly where a little below the pace that he was on last season. And remember, at the beginning of the year last year, he had a crazy tear where they were running him like a full-on running back, and then it really dropped off. Other way around. Targets were huge, and then in the second half of the year, the targets dropped off.
Right.
And they were running him more as a running back. But the premier wide back, as you've got here, Deebo Samuel signed a contract extension to stay in San Francisco after demanding a trade, because that always works. Earlier in the offseason, he should be the focal point of the offense once again, but there is a more than 0% chance we see a season closer to 2019 with his 12 points per game instead of 2021 with his 21 points per game. You mentioned 59 rushes in 2021, 41 more rushes than the second best wide receiver, most by a wide receiver since Tavon Austin. And again, Cordarrelle Patterson's still a wide receiver. I don't care how many times he lines up in the backfield. I refuse to.
Bill Belichick would disagree.
Yeah.
I mean, Cordarrelle Patterson also calls himself a safety, so who knows what he is.
Exactly. Weeks 1 through 9, like I said, I had it backwards. 75 targets was 8th in the NFL. 882 receiving yards was 2nd. He only had 6 rushes for 22 yards, but did have a rushing touchdown. And then all of a sudden, weeks 10 through 18, which kind of lined up with Elijah Mitchell getting hurt, 39 targets, tied for 39th with David Montgomery and KJ Osborne. 523 receiving yards, which was 3rd on his own team, and then 2 receiving touchdowns. But he had 53 rushes, most by any non-running back, 343 rushing yards, and 7 rushing touchdowns, which is the most rushing touchdowns in a season by a non-running back. So, again, I've got him 8. Neil, you've got him 8. Mike, 7. ECR has him at 10. Again, this is kind of an open and shut type thing. We don't think he's going to have the same year he had last year. ADP is 6. So ADP has him a little bit higher than where we've got him. The general public loves it. Right now, he's going basically as a top-end round 2 pick.
It's a little richer than what I would want to get invested in, but I can understand why folks want to. My only thing that I find kind of comical about this is he just kept insisting that he didn't want to be a running back, and then they wrote him that massive check, and suddenly it was just like, oh, I'll be a running back.
Whatever, yeah.
I'll do both. That's fine. Yeah, I didn't want to be a running back at this number you had me on, but at this number, give me the ball, coach. I'll do whatever you want me to do. So I found that to be hilarious. And it's like, they're going to use him running the ball. I would concur with the statement that will he get to 59 rushes? Probably not. And if he did, would he not get hurt in the process of doing that? The likelihood goes up significantly. So I'm not convinced he gets to there, which is partially why I'm a little scared off by 6. But how scared off could I possibly be? I ranked him at 8. He's a top 10 wide receiver as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
there's not a whole lot to really worry about.
So here's how I got to my projection. So he had 59 rushes total last year. But again, like it was noted here by Mike, 53 of those rushes were weeks 10 through 18. So he only had 6 through the first 9 weeks of the season, and then got a ton of them in the last half. So even with, like, I've got him projected for 76, but even at 76, a rush per game clip is significantly less than the boom that he had weeks 10 to 18 last year, but it's still more conservative. I don't think he goes back to being strictly a wide receiver.
No, I don't agree with that. Yeah, no, he won't go back to being purely a wide receiver like he was in like 2019 or whatever before he got hurt. That's not going to happen.
Plus, there'll be the interesting fact of him mixing in with Trey Lance as a scheme compared to what he was with Jimmy Garoppolo. Obviously, you have a lot more options of motions and where to line up in the backfield or whatever else when it's Trey Lance, a mobile quarterback back there, compared to Jimmy Garoppolo, the statue-esque model that just, wasn't very good.
I was going to say, it's a good thing he's pretty.
Yeah.
He's always got a fallback career.
I'm saying model is the right word. Yes.
Model is the right word.
Yeah. But he was Trey Lance's favorite target in the short period of time that Trey Lance was on the field.
we'll move on to the number 2 here. Brandon Aiyuk. Nothing else in this wide receiver room matters.
Agree.
But Brandon Aiyuk found himself in Shanahan's doghouse to start the season, which was crazy because he was just not involved in the offense at all. He was doing literally nothing.
Did you read Kyle Shanahan's written explanation as to why?
I think I did at some point, but I kind of block out most of what Kyle Shanahan.
I know it's all coach speak, and it's riddled with lies.
Yeah.
It's riddled with lies too.
Yeah.
So, but the gist of it was, his logic was Brandon Aiyuk came in during the COVID year, so he wanted to prove a point to Brandon Aiyuk that Brandon Aiyuk has to try and actually do all the off the field things in camp and in mini camp and in the off season, and he wasn't doing them apparently. So he came into camp underprepared and a little overweight and a little out of shape, and Shanahan decided to punish him for that. And I'm just reading this and I'm like, this might as well be written in crayon.
Yeah.
Like what is this? Like, what am I reading? So, but that's what I didn't create that. Kyle Shanahan did. You can find it on Twitter. That's his logic.
Yeah. So the point you're mentioning here is the first 6 weeks of the season, Brandon Aiyuk had a total of 16 targets, 9 catches for 96 yards. And then weeks 7 through 17, the rest of the season, he averaged 6.2 targets per game. Had 68 targets total, 47 receptions, 730 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And again, that's over an 11-game stretch to finish out the back end of the season. So I've got him wide receiver 41. Neil, so do you. Mike, 43. The ECR has him at 38. There have been so many times this offseason where I've flirted with moving him up. I have actually, in our underdog drafts, ended up with a bunch of Brandon Aiyuk. He's going at 39 in ADP right now, just because, like I said, I feel like there's a non-zero chance that Aiyuk still ends up leading this team in targets. It's not like he's terrible. I think he's going to be right there neck and neck with Deebo for most of the season. And all he has to do is not be in the doghouse for 6 weeks. Can he avoid the doghouse for a random 6-week stretch?
Based on what you had said, he'd have been a 1,000-yard receiver.
Yeah, the talent alone would be enough to make him worth the investment here. Yes, if they actually do the math. Shout out to our guys at Pro Football Reference, because I use them for a majority of our stats. So
we should probably actually be paying them. A lot of people should be.
Yeah. But yes, taking those exact same numbers, if you projected it out to a full 17-game season, he would have had 105 targets, 73 receptions, 1,128 yards, and 6 touchdowns. So
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's not terrible. And also, he will get – so we talked about the rushing with Deebo. They will give Brandon Aiyuk some carries as well. That is sort of the point of having both of these guys, is that they can both do it. And they didn't ask Aiyuk to do it so much last year, but in his rookie year, he did get some carries and some stuff like that. So he will get a small amount of rushing and things like that. But it's an interesting one, because this is one where I think people are I want to say people are scared, but the ADP doesn't really reflect that. So it's an interesting one where I'll just put it to you this way: if Brandon Aiyuk is like your what would that be, your 3rd or 4th wide receiver at that point?
Yeah.
Would you be upset about it? Because I wouldn't.
No,
be.
like I said, I've been reaching for it a lot this offseason.
I'd be pretty happy with it.
And
Mike, do you have anything Aiyuk related?
I think that if we're looking at this offense in general, one, I expect it to have less pass attempts even than last year,
mm-hmm.
and 2, it's the math. So if Deebo is going to have anything remotely close to a wide receiver, like top 12 wide receiver season, and Kittle's going to have a top 5-ish tight end season, can Aiyuk have such a good season?
Right. I have him projected at 58 because I only have him with 4 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's my only thing there. I do think he's a good player. I don't know about how a run-first offense.
Mainly, I'm talking about drafting him for upside.
Right.
Because where you would take him at wide receiver 39.
And if Deebo gets hurt.
That's the 9th round.
9th round, yeah.
Then that'd be great. Aiyuk runs in, or slides right into a great spot.
Yeah.
If Aiyuk or Kittle get hurt, but
that's true. Yeah.
If any kind of,
Samuel or Kittle.
Yeah, any kind of opening happens here on this offense, then it opens the door for him to have a larger role and be more effective. And again, it's going to depend on the touchdowns, and I'm going to use the same argument you used yesterday for Chase Claypool, because they're both rookies in 2020, and if you just look at the numbers, it's all about perception, right? Because in 2020 he had 96 targets, caught 60 of them for 748 and 5 touchdowns. Last year he had 84 targets, caught 56 of them for 826 and had 5 touchdowns. Same touchdowns, almost the same amount of catches, more yards on less targets, and yet he went from being a locked-in top 20 ADP guy like he was at this point last offseason to going around 40.
I think that's mostly because in his rookie year, he didn't start off hot at all. He, about mid-season to 2/3 through the season is when Kittle, Samuel, all these guys had gotten hurt. The entire backfield was basically hurt. So Aiyuk was catching passes from Beathard, I think, at the time, either Beathard or Mullins, and he was the number 1 target by a wide margin, and he went off the final quarter of the season. So most of his stats that rookie year came in such a small sample of games and at the end of the season that everybody remembers.
Weeks 8 through 15, he had at least 9 targets in every game.
Well, it made me laugh because people ate it up with a spoon. They ate all of that up so hard, and then the next year they got really mad because it was just why? Because they're trying to extrapolate out that small sample size the same way we just did, where it's well, if you go at this clip for the whole thing, not calculating what you're talking about, where it's well, they were completely bereft of any other options by that point. Shanahan also talked about that at one point where he was we only did that because we didn't have a choice. He was the only one that was healthy, and it just happened to work out relatively well. And then that's why I think people were so shocked when he was in the doghouse to start the year last year, myself included. I was surprised that Shanahan would do something like that. But at the same time, this is why we always recommend. You don't always want to get too involved in these Shanahan offenses and players, because the person pulling the puppet strings in the background has proven time and time again to be kind of unreliable in terms of being able to understand what he's thinking and what he's going to do. Oh, strange man.
It's again, I just feel like we had a similar conversation last year, like I said, where we were talking about Brandon Aiyuk being a top 24. He was going in the top 20. And remember, Deebo was basically off the page. He was going essentially where Aiyuk is going right now, high 40s, high to late 40s.
Well, you remember the narrative on that, right? Deebo's washed. It was really Deebo's hurt. Hurt and washed.
He was hurt.
Yeah, hurt. He got hurt. Unreliable.
ADOT was 1.8 yards downfield.
That too.
Right. That too. All of it, it's the same thing. In 2019, all the numbers he put up were when George Kittle was out and he was the only guy on the field. And then in 2020, he got hurt and did nothing. So he comes back in 2021 and is completely off the page and no one wants him. And then he explodes and has a great season. What's stopping Aiyuk from doing the same thing this year? Just worth a late round pick to me. If I can get him at a value.
Well, for the 9th round, I'm not really sweating it too hard.
So tight end, George Kittle, projected out number 5 for me in my numbers over here. I've also got him ranked number 5. You guys have him 4. ECR has him number 4. I believe that's just ahead of Waller, correct?
Yep.
And again, we've talked about it. You've got the tier at the top, which is essentially Andrews, Kelsey, and Pitts in whatever order you want to do it. And then it's Waller and Kittle in whatever order you want to do it. And then it's the field.
Right. It's that terrifying tier that people keep trying to put Dalton Schultz at the head of that I just want to avoid all of it.
Is there a ton to talk about with George Kittle? I think that's really it.
No, if he's playing, you want him.
Yeah, I talked about, I'll bring it up again here, but I talked about it a little in the Philly episode when we were talking about Dallas Goedert. But essentially, I feel good about the top 3. if I'm in a spot on the draft where I feel like I can get some good guys at running back and wide receiver later, I'm okay biting the bullet and taking Andrews, Kelsey, Pitts somewhere in my first 3 picks. If I feel like I'm getting them at a deal and I can build my roster around it, I'm okay doing that. For what I have to pay for Waller and Kittle, I kind of feel like I'm going to pass on it, and then I'm going to basically punt at that point and just take 2 dart throws at tight end at the end. Depends on how your roster is built ahead of it or how far they fall down the board. But yeah, to me, it's just too much to pay for a tight end.
I'd agree with that. Yeah. Mike, do you want to go through the ones? I love your stat here that you have for Kittle. Do you want to just read that off real quick for the people at home?
So there have been 12 games where a tight end hit 140 receiving yards and had at least a touchdown since 2018. And Kittle has 5 of those 12 games.
It's pretty good.
Like, that's just what he does. He goes off.
Yeah,
50% of those boom games belong to one hand, just shy of it.
That's
pretty good. Like, that's so. I don't want. Yeah, I don't. I just
that
want,
is
don't
the
want
reason
people,
I have him over Waller.
Yeah, I have him over Waller also because of the addition of Devontae Adams. But that's a whole. We already covered.
True, but I mean that's another reason.
The big thing with Kittle is just, you know, if he's healthy and he's out there, he's a monster. So we all know this. There's not too much to really belabor the point on. It does beg the question though. If he gets hurt with Kittle getting hurt, is there anything else tight end wise that anyone should know about?
No, we already talked about it. If he gets hurt, then just Deebo and Aiyuk both move up.
Okay, because I think we all see that the
if
same way.
If any of the top 3 get hurt, it's just added to the other 2. Nobody else you want to really look at.
Yep. Okay.
Whoever is your one kind of stays the same. So let's say we all agree Deebo is the 1. So if Aiyuk gets hurt, Kittle moves up a little bit in terms of reliability. If Kittle gets hurt, Aiyuk moves into a more wide receiver 3, back end wide receiver 2 type territory because of the value. That's it.
Yep.
That's the
defense and kicker. San Francisco currently going number 6 in ADP. I have them projected as 13. The NFC West is going to be pretty decent outside of Seattle. So I think we can all agree on that. But I mean, they don't turn the ball over or take the ball away very much. So you're mainly relying on sacks here, which scares me off a little bit. Depends on the situations and the QB that they're playing, the line that they're playing. So it's more of a streaming option in my mind than a locked in team I have to draft and have on my roster. And then Robbie Gould is Robbie Gould. He does what he does. He's a kicker. Want him, go get him. But 16th round and never sooner. And that's it. That's San Francisco. All right. One more team in the NFC West, and we'll get to them tomorrow. Seattle. Until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!